Hello,
Hello.
everyone. Welcome. We have a special interview today. I am not alone in interviewing, which is exciting. Today, I am joined by I.Anonymous, author of The Wars of Wrath, and Bookish Chas, who also wrote a book. I cannot forget to say that, Talendar's guest.
I love Talendor's Guest. It's a lovable book. It's like just a great lovable book.
Thank you.
And why don't we do a round table where why don't we start with you, I.Anonymous? Just tell us a bit about yourself, your book, and then we'll go around to you, Chaz.
So I'm I.Anonymous. I'm the anonymous author of the Wars of Wrath series, which is Gurzil and Badon Hill, and they've been out not only about a year now, actually, since the first one got published. I think it got published to March of 2022. So it's only been about a year since I've been doing all this. Feels a lot longer, but um, Badon Hill came out about 6 months after the release of the first one, and I have two audiobooks actually out now for both of them, which were done by Brian McKee, who was just excellent to work for. Both kind of just starting out in this, but hey, it's T. Hi, T.
Yeah, how's it going, T?
T has you all at a disadvantage because T has actually beta read the first chapter of the next book.
Ah,
Oh,
that's cool.
so you
Very
have all the
awesome.
juicy details here, T. And how about you, Chaz?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm Chaz. My channel is Bookish Chas, and as mentioned, I'm also a fantasy author, Talendor's guest, and a soon-to-be forthcoming book as well. So yeah, so I just really excited to be here. I have read both books by I Anonymous, and this is the first chance he and I actually get to chat other than just Discord. And so this is fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I actually wanted to start with a question, if that's all right, because
Go ahead.
I want to know some stuff.
Oh, okay.
So I always find it interesting to learn about an author's self-publishing journey. And I was curious how that's been for you, especially with the I Anonymous, keeping that and the word anonymity.
The actually that all came about as part of the self-publishing journey. Originally, like most people that start this, I had this vision of being this named author and going down in history with Tolkien and everybody else. And then I realized that that really would cause other problems for other aspects of my life. And as I went in, it's become a real it became a real kind of weird thing when you go to the because originally I started with the author tubes and then slowly made my way over to the book tubes as I was looking for beta readers. And I actually started on Inkit, which is a really strange community. It's a great community, and I met some great people there, and it was a great place to sort of get my start. And I recommend, if you're an author and stuff, you should start with a Wattpad or I think Kindle Vellum. I haven't used it, but I hear it's pretty good. Or Inkit was actually very good. And build your tribe there. You'll get like maybe people have that. Oh, I can't put it out there. The 10 people that read your book on on one of the novel pads are not going to cut into your sales. They are going to be your beta readers. They're going to give you real good feedback. And on Inkit and all of that, it was much more comfortable to be anonymous. And you live in this world of very strange pen names. And so I took that one because it's just easier. And then when you move into things like the next place that I ended up going was I started looking at, how do you publish? And know that Chas probably went through this because every self-published author goes through this. When you start looking for that, the first people that you're going to find are complete scammers. They're a vanity press that want to go, here, yeah, hand me $1,000. I'll get your book published.
Right.
But why is your publishing house called Nigerian Prince Press?
Red flags.
Well, I will say this, just to be out here for anybody, all those self-publishing authors and people who are planning on doing this, because I know so many that fall into it, and once they're in there, they almost don't want to get out. They're like embarrassed that they like got stuck in this, and it's like, no, you can always get out, because I've seen so many terrible things go down with that. Usually, a self-published author only has so much resources to put towards his project or his or her project. And the other point is that they also, a lot of those places, a lot of these vanity presses, they sell you that whole full service package. And in that full service package is a very scary thing. They will copyright your book for you. Oops. Now they've copyrighted it under their domain. Now they basically go, well, you could sue us or you could just pay us to get your rights back. But so you end up, so there's a lot of that going on. I did find there is actually some hope there. Relatively new thing is Weedsy, which everything, and it's basically a marketplace, and they just work as the middleman and the guarantor, basically. And I've heard there are horror stories about Weedsy too, but they work as the guarantor, and you hire somebody from them. You take bids on maybe 3 or 4 authors and editors, and they send them back. You pick the one that you think is going to work best, that has the right price tag, and don't just go for the cheapest one. Go for the one that actually seems to have a plan and is actually excited about doing your work. That one matters. Mm-hmm. Don't be the Witcher, people. We've all seen the Witcher series and know how that went down. Having collaborators that want to work with you is important.
For sure.
But and that's why my audiobook has come out so wonderfully, and it was just a wonderful working from Brian McKee. But back to Weedsy. So Weedsy does that. Weedsy works, and everything is pretty much done through Weedsy, and they're just sort of the vulture looking over your shoulder, making sure that everything is being done properly, that their deadlines, that everybody's more or less happy, and that the deadlines are being met, and that the quality that the editor originally promised is the quality that they continue to deliver, and they don't just get to vanish on you with your money, because a lot of these editors, the problem was if they want to be paid up front, and at the same time you don't have any real, if you just pass this off to somebody that you pass off your credit card information to somebody that you don't know, or you just pay them on PayPal, there's nothing stopping them from making sure they deliver. They can just disappear on you, and then it's a real hard time to try to get this back.
Right.
And then after that, I started thinking I wanted to make an audiobook, and I was real questioning as to how I might do that, how I might afford to do that, and then discovered I didn't actually have to pay anything to do it. I take any self-published author at this point can pretty much just put their stuff, go to ACX, take bids, and then they can find the first people that'll come to them will obviously be the groups that do this for profit, and you pay them up front for every purchased hour, and then they produce your audiobook and you take it and keep all your royalties. The next group will be those that want some money up front, and then and a percentage of what you sell, and then you'll find, in my case, it was actually very easy because he was also the purely best performance. He had a great evil dragon voice.
That's
He just did. It was
important.
like I told myself that I wanted a good narration voice, and I wanted a good dragon voice. And so many other audiobook sellers, audiobook producers at the moment, they're like, oh, I want, multiple narrators and all of this. And it's like, no, you don't. You just pick the voice that matters to you and go with that voice, because that voice is going to be the one that sells. So I
Yeah.
picked this great. He had this great dragon voice, and he was just starting out and just wanted, and really his only thing was that he just said, I really just want, if you keep making the series, I just want to keep being your narrator and taking a share of the profits. I want to finish this series with you. And I did you're taking the same chances I'm taking. I'm more than happy to do that. And, so many people get tied up and with so much other, they run themselves into holes. I think that's probably the thing that stops more books from going to becoming published novels, that you tried to traditionally publish and that didn't work, and so you give up. And I did try to traditionally publish. I did everything wrong when I tried to traditionally publish, and by the time that I realized that I had done everything wrong, I had sent queries for the book to everybody. There are not an unlimited number of agents. I don't care what they tell you. But and then that sort of is why I ended up self-publishing myself. And I need to. Once you've made the book, you don't get a second shot at it. Maybe a couple years down the road. But people go, oh no, I edited it and then I sent it back, and I'm like, and it didn't even get opened.
Yeah, and kind of talking about your narrator there, I wanted to ask what that was like for you working with Brian, I think it was, and
Oh, it
trying
was
to get the character work and the voices and all of
actually
that across.
he's done. He is purely awesome when it comes to doing the characters, and in some cases, the character he came up with was difficult. He came up with a different character, and it was different from what I'd planned on. But in many cases, I liked it better. And Badon Hill, one of the voices he came up with for what had originally been a bit part, but I hate having bit parts. I like to find ways that my little throwaway character suddenly becomes this linchpin character. And this throwaway character that he'd come up with, which was one of the greens, when they went in the Pedentus chapter, where they come to get the guy that he was charged with protecting, and he had such a great voice for that, and I'm like, oh no, we have to retool a few things so that this evil character is that person. Like, we're going to tool a few little things. So in a lot of ways, it's a really, everything in writing builds on itself. It's all part of the process. And, until you've brought a book from start to finish, you haven't gotten there. You learn a lot more. And the more you learn, the better your stuff gets. certainly the second audiobook was better than the first one. And the better your stuff gets, and the how do you put this? The lower the actually for self-publishing as well, the lower your cost gets. I recommend that most people that publish smaller books. See if you can split your book in half.
Mhm.
Talentor's Guest is about the right length for a book. Gurzil's a little bit short. Badon Hill's about the right size. Talentor's Guest is like Goldilocks there. But when people ask you, oh, it's like so hard to bring a book. I just want to like finish it. It's like no. Profits is the number of books you write. You get paid. You're only going to really charge about $2.90 at most for a self-published novel.
Mhm.
Maybe you go up to $3 or $4, but really that's the upper limit. And so if your book is big, then your editor is charging you by word count. Your print is charging you by page count. So your profits are, so your cost is word count, and your profits is number of books.
Mhm.
So if you can, I could probably have fit the entirety of the Wars of Wrath series into 4 books. Badon Hill and Gurzil were originally one book that got split. That I said, this is a good resolution point right here. We're gonna cut this. We're gonna cut this in half and move on. The other point, well, in my case, that's a little bit easier because I like to write my way deep in the past prologues that world build.
Mhm.
And I would, and sometimes they're like the first one where it's way deep, and then it was a little less deep, and the third one is Dawn of Time.
We're going back. We're turning the clock
Way back
backward.
with the next one.
So, Chaz, do you have any questions before I jump into the next one?
Not so much question, but I did want to mention in regards to your name. I personally thought it was rather clever. And I don't know if this was intentional or part of the decision, but I initially immediately thought of I, Claudius, like
Yeah.
and especially with the background of your books being in Saxon and medieval history. I mean, it just
No. I, Claudius, you. I'm surprised. Sometimes I do these little things, and I'm like, no one's gonna figure it out. I would be really cool if somebody figured it out. But no. I, Claudius, was a big one. There is, I have a number of wonderful reasons for my name. I didn't want to be anonymous, just plain anonymous, because a lot of the things you need to put a first name and a last name, so you have to have two names.
right.
I, Claudius, did strike me, and I also didn't want to be the same author name as
Mhm.
say Beowulf and Gawain and the Green Knight. I wanted to be
Right.
a little bit different, and it really fit in with my my forward or author's note that I put in the beginning there.
Mhm.
And there is a plot reason for it in the end. That's going to be at the very end. And
Okay.
it's a pretty good plot. It is a pretty good thing. But no, the whole name, it's up here. It's up here someplace. It's up there with that whole back thing. But yes, I, Claudius is definitely, you can see how that's a book I've read.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely. Cool.
Awesome.
Go for it,
Well,
Kayla.
yeah, I kind of wanted to talk about the story a little bit, mainly from the dedication that you did in Gurzil. I found it quite endearing. If it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and
Go
read it,
ahead.
and then perfect. So, for my daughter Athena, may the dragons of hate that plague this world fall before the righteous, that you may live in an age of peace. I
Yeah,
thought
that's
that was
awesome.
absolutely beautiful, and it fits the themes so well in this. Can you
It
talk
really
about it?
did. Well, I originally started writing this. I'd written a few other books that no one should ever read ever. If I come out with a steampunk novel, call it quits. I'm on a cash grab. Okay, I don't
We'll
care if
rein
I'm a
you back
traditionally
in.
published author. I've broken out the old material and it's bad. Um, but no. When I started writing this, my daughter had just been born. It was sort of I'd started putting together a lot of the research and I've been reading a lot of these sort of older books uh, because I was stuck on a bed with my pregnant wife during COVID. We were
Mm,
we were pregnant during COVID. This was not a fun
No,
enterprise,
been there.
no.
and um, so like most people, you started something new in COVID. Everybody did. This was a
Right.
new chapter of everyone's life.
Yeah.
Some of us very much want to abandoned it. Others of us have kept going with it. Um, and then my daughter was born, and I started. I've always been a storyteller, so I start coming up with a story, and I have this beautiful dark-skinned biracial baby, and I'm reading her princess books, and I'm going, what am I gonna do when she asks why the princesses don't look like her? Because we still have failed here.
Right.
Much as we've tried, we failed. And I said, no, no, no. I know one that is this Libyan princess, and obviously somebody in the 21st century, in this day and age where we're casting, you know, characters with ethnic authors, with ethnic actors to fill our quotas here. Somebody has thought of the George and the Dragon and has made a new children's book with, an African princess. No, there wasn't one. So I sat down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write this out. And I start with the idea that he would be an author, that George would be a British knight of the Round Table, because that's sort of the tradition of George the Dragon Slayer that's popular. And I
Hmm.
set out looking for the research because I'm big into the research and found nothing. I found nothing. Like, it was creepy how little there is. There's the Golden Legend, there's the Fairy Queen, and that's it.
Mm.
He's a canonized saint. I go looking for the canonization, and it's like George is of the saints that is justly revered by men, but whose acts are known only to God. And I'm like, that is the biggest cop out I've ever heard in history.
Right.
That is, we don't know. um, and so I started, really looking into the history and all of that, and kept finding strange parallels to places and in my case, there were even places I'd been, and I knew more about the Libya situation than most people do. But and so I kept going into that, and eventually end up with ended up with so at first it's this little short children's novel that I have outlined out for how it begins and then how it ends. And then I keep writing and I keep writing, and it becomes a YA book, like a nice little mid-grade King Arthur, Merlin, happy kind of thing. And then it gets a little darker. Then it got a lot darker. and then I started actually writing the dragon and realized that this was going to give kids. Originally I was like, no, the dragon can be scary, Dark Crystal, and there was scary novels. You can have scary villains in a children's book. And then my good guys started becoming bad guys, and that whole that whole situation. Once you're impaling people and setting them on fire, you are firmly out of the mid-grade YA
Hmm.
um, series, and I found a lot of things that I could do with it. And as I've moved on, and the books that I've been able to read since then, and many of them were books I'd read before, but yeah, it came out, and so it, we got tea here. We'll point out that the original book had almost come off like a nice happy Bible story kind of book. It was originally geared for that, and then it started changing. But I think the evolution was good, and I think even despite that, it had that. I wanted eventually at that point. I sort of said no. This is a story. This is a story that doesn't need to be sanitized. Um, it can be. It would have been a dark. It was a dark point because as you learn more about the history, you realize just what a dark point in history it was, and
Oh yeah.
just how
Yeah.
close it all came to just falling completely apart. I
Mhm.
liked The Winter King. I did. I liked the whole series. I read it. I read the Saxon stories. I found them very similar, eerily similar. But I mean, I liked all of his stuff. I read Sharp's Rifles when I was younger and all of that. And Chas knows that this is how I ended up actually sending him a copy. I was unsure about how I was going to approach because he was like probably I think you were the first booktuber I actually approached.
Okay.
I hadn't really gotten a plan on how I was going to do this. But then the Winter King came up, and I'm like, uh, this is an opening. I'm going to go for it.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's how I ended up, sending him an arc.
Mm.
And then I got, and that was really the one that got the ball rolling. Once you get one kind of person that says yes, you gain a lot of confidence in this, and you start figuring it out. And now there's, Nico's book reviews and a bunch of other ones that have all really grown attached. One of the weirdest ones was the one I will say this, the only one that I never got back to me and I was sad about, I really wanted that review, was Andrew.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm talking about um the audiobooks, and I have promo codes. And so somebody was talking to me and I'm like, yeah, I'll send you promo codes for it. And Andrew's like, can I have promo codes? And I'm like, you want promo codes? You got promo codes, you got physicals, you got the whole kit. I mean,
Yeah, I think he mentioned he forgot to check his emails. He made it and then he never
yeah,
checked
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think
that's
I
how that
remember that.
happened.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But that's why that's one of the fun things about the
Mm.
booktube. You keep running into you just keep sticking it out because I stayed with Andrew's channel because I love his content.
Mm.
He's one of the few that actually put, there's a bunch of you, but he consistently puts out a great deal of self-published authors.
He does. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, he's a
I think he
powerhouse.
almost at this point, maybe he doesn't want to, but I think he almost exclusively at this point does indie authors.
I think he's totally fine with that from what I've heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, just to go back with the retellings, because the Kaiju says it here as well. Sometimes it feels like there's nothing darker than history.
Hmm.
I grew up with a lot of the movies and TV show retellings of Arthurian legends and that whole
Same.
era, and they always had a rose-colored lens over it, romanticizing it rather than showing the darker
Right.
sides. I mean, sometimes they showed them, but not nowhere near as
Right.
dark as what it actually
So,
was.
like I said, I started with a children's book
Mhm.
because you can rose color. Author is designed that you can rose color it. It was the Lamort the author is certainly rose-colored, despite everything that's going on. When you actually think about what they're doing and what Lancelot has just done, you go, in a lot of ways, like a lot of Greek myths are like that as well. The Iliad is very rose-colored. The worst one is Hercules. If you read the actual Hercules myth, you go, "Oh, what happened? What is this? Why are we calling this individual heroic?" And when you look at so that when they go to adapt them, you realize then they feel nothing like the legend, because if you adapted the legend, you would just you want to know the only one I can point it out to is the Bible story Kings. Everybody tries. It's a great story with Saul and David and everybody. Everybody wants to adapt this story to television. There's been 20, 30 attempts here with big budgets and everything, and they all abysmal failures, because this is a book. This is a story that has, when you sit there and say, what are the trigger warnings for Kings? All of them.
Right.
All of them. There was no trigger warning that isn't included in Twigs. And so the Bible group doesn't read it, doesn't watch it, because, well, it's this terribly violent and horrific thing. And but the people that would enjoy, that don't read it because it's a Bible thing. And so the ratings just crash. But when it comes to King Arthur, when you read the Mort, which is the real canon one, as far as people say, you realize that this is rose-colored. So the history of the kings of Britain is also rose-colored. When you read things at the time, however, things like Gildas, things like the Wars of Justinian, books written in that time frame, you realize that warfare at this time was bloody, and that these Grail knights that would have been running around, keeping order, these weren't really people keeping order. These were individuals riding on a tank that were essentially a hit squad. That's something I sort of tried to get in there with the Rangers, and will continue to move forward. And certainly something Tolkien sort of even put in with the Dunedain. You get the impression that, Aragorn and his lot, even when you see him only a few times, and you never see him in the movies, you only see him in the books. But when you see them, they're described as grim, gnarly kind of individuals that, even when you compared to the Rohirrim, these are guys you wouldn't want to meet in a dark alley, in the forest on your thing. And even the Bree folk are you don't want to meet those guys. They're dangerous. And that would have been and that seems to be, when you read, especially things like Croc and Owen and the earlier stuff, this is what these people are acting like. Reading these knights at that period of time was not something you wanted to do. You didn't want you didn't want the knight, and you see it even a little bit later on. You didn't want the Knights of the Round Table to come knocking on your door. And other legends that came from this period of time, the other one that everybody's well known in, and I do include it because it is an Arthurian legend, is King Lear. When you see King Lear, his daughters and everybody else is going, we have a nutcase with 100 armored warriors. Who thought this was a bright idea? And that's the whole point of it. It's like we this is bad. This is a problem. And in their case, they have, the other point was that it is one of the weird things about Britain, as opposed to, say, France or even Spain, is that in Britain you actually had the best of the best as far as the soldiers were concerned. These were the historians describe them as being these warriors that you did want.
Right.
And there's a lot of indication when you read things like just the Wars of Justinian, that many of their mercenary forces were recruited by basically hiring them off of noblemen in the north. So they're sending, and they describe Britain specifically. They're sending gold to Britain, and they're getting soldiers, but Britain has nothing to send them but soldiers. So they're sending back these soldiers, and I may be giving away where the series is going to go, but it's an interesting period of time, and it's a time that spans two legendariums. You have on one side you have the medieval stuff. We're sort of between history here.
Mm-hmm.
You have the medieval era. You have all of that politics is starting to materialize itself, certainly in Francia. In Britain, we haven't really come up with a plan for how do we choose kings.
Mm-hmm.
Even one of my favorite chapters was, and I totally stole that from Monty Python, but I kind of consider that Monty Python has as much right to the genre as everybody else, and has done.
Of course it does.
Monty Python was my first. Probably my first introduction into into King Arthur.
Oh wow, okay.
And so, but when you get there, you go, when you're looking into the actual history, you go, no, it must be like, there must be this tradition. And it's like, no, the Roman, you only have 3 generations, and it's pretty much just been chaos since the Roman army left. And so nobody's come up with a plan as to how you choose kings. So even like when they're standing there at the Battle of Badon going, we need to pick a king, they have this, the only other parallel would be like the end of Judges, like we have all of these badass warriors, but we don't have a mechanism for deciding which one of them is in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to come up with a way of picking one. And how do you do that and claim any legitimacy without everybody just starting killing each other? And in this case, an Arthurian legend actually tells us how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
We in a very Saul and Samuel kind of way, Merlin has him get the sword. The sword is it conveys the power. And I think that was part of the Arthurian myth that's just necessary, and something I found lacking in a lot of the rose-colored editions. You have to see, if you don't see it this brutally, you don't get the idea that how badly this could all go if we don't actually come up with a legitimate way of making both the Christians and the pagans happy about which king we chose.
Right.
Yeah, you're adding less of the rose color and more of the stakes, right?
Right.
And then like going back to the dedication, you're also writing something that, you hope your daughter will be able to find herself in representation down the line. And from what it yeah. And from what it sounds like too, this is a series that will grow with its audience for those who are reading it in their young adult years.
Certainly readers like T and Javier, who helped me with a lot of the beta reading, have had a major impact as to the direction. And basically, originally I was tapping down the religious aspects and kind of did this would have been very important to them. All of these, and if you actually look at any medieval king, one of the interesting things I've recently kind of figured out when I was researching this, if you look at these individuals, you see that they saw themselves as one of these biblical king figures. And so you get to say, well, no, who did Arthur see himself as? Arthur would have seen himself as Saul, this first king that's coming, going to build this great empire. Whereas, George sees himself much more as a Samson figure. This kind of, we're going to live with these, we're not the same people. We don't have to like each other, but we do have to live with each other. Saxons and pagans and Britons all have to come to some sort of agreement, and we don't need, there needs to be some sort of check on the central authority, or that's just all going to go crazy on that side.
Yeah. And there's definitely a political advantage to having the religious backdrop to your reign as well.
Right. And everybody did, and especially in this case, it's like, and in Arthur's case, he has both. When you read the How Did Arthur Get Crowned, you got a very pagan individual. You got Merlin, who basically everybody just goes, he's a druid. Let's just call him a druid, be done with it.
Yep.
And then you also have the bishop. And when you read certain accounts, it's like Krakatoa, it's almost all about the Merlin. And when you read other accounts like Gregory of Monmouth, it's all about the archbishop. And so you kind of do that. No, this is an individual. And when you look at it as well, you go, this wasn't and one of the bits where it comes into the rose color is, he wasn't the best choice when you look at it. He was highly opposed. The King of the 100 Knights is definitely is often presented as a better choice. His brother is a better choice. The reason that he is the choice is that he's the only choice that doesn't have a lot of religious baggage on both sides. He's somebody that, the bishops can go and be okay with, and the pagans and the druids can say, well, he's Merlin's apprentice. We can live with that. And that's very much the case where he's the individual that was the best of both options, and that's why we picked him. And then, but even after that, there is major resistance to it. There is a whole war that he ends up fighting over his succession, and before he can convince these people. And then in the end, they all turn against him. They all side with Mordred at the because he goes down and he gets involved in wars on the continent and kind of leaves Britain for a while, and then Mordred kind of comes in, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Because all of the nobles that were not on his side did not go with him when he left Britain. They all stayed there and then did their own thing again.
I'm curious. Do you have an extensive background in the historical sources for a lot of this, or was it kind of new for you when you decided you wanted to start writing this book?
Yes and no. I'd read King Arthur. I'd read Beowulf. The Wars of Justinian was a new thing that I read, as was The Secret History. I do recommend to anybody who, they're good reads. So The Secret History is a short read, but it's impressive the amount of information you have and the amount of inspiration you can see into other authors. I mean, you when you read it, one of the books if you read The Secret History, the book you're going to immediately start seeing all of this in is Dune. You're going to go, this is the series, this is the Dune, this is Dune from even his earlier writing, even the stuff his son, wrote on his earlier writings, all the way through Heretics. This is that. I mean, the Harkonnens, the Atreides, you see their parallels straight down the line. Certainly Solomon and Sergius, these are the Harkonnen. This is Baron Harkonnen and his nephews that are given this desert basically, yet this is the grain supply for the entire empire.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
there's a lot there, the history. And the surprising thing is that when you sit here and you go, well, did you have a great background in the history? There isn't that much. The kind of fun thing is there just isn't that much history if you actually are reading the primary sources, the things that are actually been passed down from that time, not the history book commentaries, which are, books and books and volumes and volumes and many
Sure.
books.
Yeah.
But if you would just go back and read what they had for what was actually written down, there's only like, you couldn't fill this bookcase with them. Most of them are very short. Gildas is like only like 5 or 6 pages. Many of the origins and the history of the Goths and other books that had all this history recorded in it is very short, very readable, because at that period in history, it's still very much reads like Roman Chronicles.
Okay.
They're still recording it like a Roman Chronicle would, as opposed to Chas is looking at me going, you read, like, when you get up to like Kraken and even a bit beyond that, where the stuff was recorded later, it's very much religious.
Hmm.
It reads completely as with religious allegory, you have to go through pages, and then there's also the pages and pages and pages of what they ate at the feast and everything. It really does. There are entire scenes in there are entire like portions of this, and the people did feast on orangutans and every other creature imaginable,
Wow.
and you just have to kind of skip through that. But um, I was always one of those that took a very global view of history
Hmm.
and wanted to figure out everything about certain points when I actually start researching them.
Hmm.
And so when you research them, you find interesting things happening at that same period of time. Like, you can research just Dark Age Britain, but that only gives you a portion of this. It doesn't tell you what, if I'm writing about, just some blacksmith, well, sure, all he's ever going to know is going to be this. But
Hmm.
in my case, where I'm writing about individuals that were educated, so they know about they would have been taught all the Roman histories. They would have,
Hmm.
been their tactics. They would have been taught, Roman tactics and stuff, just as we teach all of these battles today.
Hmm.
But these would have been exactly, you know, they would have known how the Roman Empire rose, how the Roman Empire fell. They would know even things that are not well known now, things like the crisis of the third century. Um, but when I make these characters, I have to say, what does this character know about? So in certain cases, like with Galahad, obviously, Galahad has been raised in a monastery. All Galahad knows is the religious aspect. He doesn't
Hmm.
know much of He wouldn't have been taught much of the other history. He just knows the religion and the politics that the religion is moving. Whereas someone like George, who was, taught by this former king and had all these other instructors, he knows different things.
Hmm.
Arthur was trained by Merlin, and so he knows, really, he's an expert, even more so almost than George, on all of the power players in Britain, but that's really where his knowledge ends. I try not to make my characters know everything. They know what they would know at the time. They didn't have Wikipedia. So
Right.
Yeah.
what
Hmm.
they would have, so even like Saba was a highly educated person because she grew up in this place that had a major education going for it. She was this princess. She was the only son of a very powerful king, who expected that she would at some point take over.
Mm-hmm.
So she was taught how to speak the languages she would need to talk to people. She would need to be able to speak, so she speaks even weird languages like Armenian, like all of this, because she grew up in this trade center.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she can ride a horse. She can do all of this, but she's not at the same time, she's not Rambo. She is not Caboan. When it comes down to the actual fighting of the battle, she lacks a lot of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even in your review, you put something down where Guinevere, I put Guinevere down as she's actually one of the warlords. She's
Mm-hmm.
the
Right.
only daughter. Like if you go by the legends, she's the only child of the king of Camliard, which was the area where the Brigantes lived. So this is a pretty big place. And if you think about the Brigantes often had queens, powerful queens. They were usually ruled by about half the time they were ruled by a queen. When Claudius invades and makes his alliance with the Brigantes, it's a queen he's talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually has more. She's the queen, even though she's married. She's married to another chieftain, but he's a lesser chieftain. So in this case, I saw her very much as this is when you even read about her. She goes in the rose-colored editions. She comes off very much as a just the hostage girl. Like she constantly taken hostage. That's what we see of Guinevere. But even when she's taken hostage, half the time in these legends, by the time the knights show up, she's sitting there drinking, and she's already made a deal with whoever taken her hostage, and they're like, "Why did we just like slay dragons and entire armies to get here to find you sipping on wine and having a fun, you know, giggling over the risotto? What happened here?"
Right.
So and that was another part of the Arthurian mythos that I actually felt was another reason why I went to a lot of the darker stuff. I wanted to get away from the idea that these women at this period of time were that they were not hostage girls. When you read about Crackett Owen, Enid is probably one of my favorite characters. It's like they're describing her, and she keeps coming back, and you're like, this woman is working as a scout. This is the scout. She is going out. She is coming back and saying, "I see 10 knights over there. You need to go around this way and kill them from behind." And so you see them doing that. You see them as scouts. You see them as defenders of castles, because at this period of time, these armies were very small. So the entire army leaves, and the person in charge is usually going to be some lady, whichever one was the highest lady of the castle at that point would be left in charge, so that all of the captains and all of that could leave, because otherwise you had to leave you probably had to leave your second best warrior or something in the castle if you didn't do that, because you had to leave somebody with some clout. Like that's why they leave Morgana when they left.
Mm-hmm.
And Morgana was always one of those interesting characters, because this is Castle Hostos, so the lady of Castle Hostos there's Lady Bertilac, and then but the other one that seems almost higher ranked is Morgana. And if you haven't read Green and the Green Knight, I apologize for that spoiler.
So Kaiji, I just want to. She left this comment here saying, "This conversation reminds me of a quote I recently read. The history of the world was written in the woman's womb, a woman and woman's blood."
Okay, where did that quote come from? Because I always look for those kind of quotes.
Yeah, that's a great quote, right?
I was going to say that's a great quote. That's going to probably end up in one of the book as one of the, because well that one of the things I do is I put a historical quote
Mm-hmm.
or in some form at the beginning of each chapter, because originally I read out, I couldn't decide which historical quote I was going to start the book with. And so that I ended up just
Oh,
going with each chapter had its own.
Kingfisher.
Huh.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I haven't read A.T. Kingfisher yet, but yeah, that's a great quote.
Yes, that is definitely going to get used at some point. I don't know where chapter I'm going to use it in, but
Oh,
From
Nettle and
Nettle and
Bone.
Bone.
Okay.
Nice.
That book's been on my list. That's good.
I
Same.
I'll have to read that book. But
Um, so you write very capable female characters. They can hold their own in various different ways. And I love that you match the character's education to what they would have had at the time, being very mindful of the world building, the era. You put a lot of detail into this series, and it seems like you're looking really far ahead because I think you've got this planned as an 8 or 9 book series.
yeah, it's probably it's at this point an 8-book series, but sometimes the books get away from you.
So 10, 12,
It's probably never gonna. No. I have an upper limit. It will never be more than 10. 10 is too many books. More than 10, and I'm done. I'm done. That said, there may be maybe a companion series after that, which may actually be a series that I try to traditionally publish. But
Nice.
a very standalone series. But
Very nice.
yeah,
So this is
he
for
did
Nettle and
Good
Bone.
to
such a
know.
good job of the audiobook. I am like, over the moon, especially once you get to that dragon chapter, like number 1. I tend to have people hooked at that point.
Yeah.
They still don't understand what's going. They like. I think Chels from Not So Secret Bookaholic put it best. You have no idea what's happening for the first hundred pages of this book, and then after that point, it all starts to kind of fit together, and then you kind of start to get and then you just in it.
Yeah.
But well, the other plus side to writing female characters is that I have many strong female characters in my life.
Mm.
Certainly, Princess Saba is based off of my wife, and she's
Mm.
certainly a very capable woman in her own right.
Mm.
Very cool.
And but again, it always just struck me that in many cases, a lot of the politics, a lot of the dealing is being done at this period of time by the female characters. That's why they're so prevalent. When you read this, like, and it's not just there, only once you're into like the later Middle Ages do they start to sort of almost write the women out of history.
Mm.
In this period of time, even in like places where you wouldn't expect it, like in the court of Justinian, they're pretty much the just Theodora's court is pretty much in more or less command of most of the city, most of the empire, the military aspects. When you look at things like Belisarius's campaigns, he doesn't look like he could win a battle unless his wife is with him. And you go, which one is the brains? He's obviously a very good and charismatic, battlefield officer, but somebody else is doing all the tactics, because whenever he tries to plan tactics and his wife isn't with him on campaign, it does not go well.
Mm.
It's like complete military disasters. And you're like, this is not the same. Whoever's planning this is not the same person. And
Mm.
so in this case, I saw a lot of characters that fell into that same sort of role in Arthur. You see Morgana, who is definitely not a warrior. Did we never hear about Morgana in anything resembling a military situation? Um, she's always the knife in the back. She's always the poison in the chalice. She's
Mm.
always the one that manipulates other characters into doing what she needs done. And then at the other time, you have um, Isolde, who is certainly sort of between her and what I see as Guinevere,
Mm.
uh, which is Isolde is this character that has not gotten a good shake of it. This is not what she expected to have happen in her life, and wants something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that that whole drama is only just unfolding, so I won't go into that too much. There's a lot on result coming up. I've foreshadowed a lot of it, but yeah.
Well, T said it there. He's excited for book 3.
As I said,
Cool.
T's
Yeah,
working with a deck everybody else doesn't have. He knows how he saw how I begin book 3 and knows enough about me and my writing to, I think, extrapolate as to the level of carnage that is about to unfold.
Oh, I'm ready.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll go through some final questions.
Yeah.
Anyone who's watching, feel free to throw questions in the chat. Chaz, do you have anything else you'd like to mention?
Well, I had a comment and a question. My comment is one of the best scenes in the books that I read so far was in book 2 with the creation of Excalibur. That was very unique and very well done. That was I think my favorite scene in book 2 was the creation of Excalibur. I haven't seen that done before. It's definitely
Well,
unique
that
and
I borrowed a lot of that. I can't speak to how any that. I borrowed the whole dragon creates Excalibur. That one has been alluded to in many of the other texts, but was really hammered home in the TV show Merlin.
Oh, okay.
Which is something that I think that's something certainly Kay has seen and is probably a lot. That's such a popular, and it was such a long running thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that, one of the great things about Arthurian myth is that you can just pick and say, I really liked this aspect or how this character was done. And so from Merlin, I did pick 5 or 6 aspects that I liked. I think that Morgana in Merlin was probably the best rendition of Morgana ever made. I think that Uther was a great character in that show, and that he really, really was and I sort of based my Uther on him.
Okay.
And I did not like the dragon in Merlin or the entire dragon concept that they run down in Merlin. I did like the idea of the dragon making the sword, and I felt that there needed to be a creation of Excalibur. There needed to be, because Excalibur's weird, because you need to get 2 things into an Arthurian novel with Excalibur, and they both have to be there and they both have to work somehow. And one is that the sword has to come from the Lady of the Lake.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the other one is that he has to pull the sword from the stone.
Mm-hmm.
Both of these are necessary. If you just dismiss one and go only with the other, people feel gypped.
Mm-hmm.
They feel very gypped. They feel like, I wanted to see, because we love both of them. Mm-hmm. There isn't one method that we like more than the other one. It isn't that like, well, this method was okay, and this method really we could dismiss this. Mm-hmm. And so the other aspect was that I needed to put a check on Gurzil's power. And I go into this a lot more into book 3, and I do a little bit more with it when you see him at the end with, Caboed and his daughter, and goes, nope, there are rules, and I'm not allowed to just eat this person. Mm-hmm. And that seemed like a very powerful check where, no, he can't now. He's protected.
Right.
Sorry, this was absolutely hilarious. Dive into the lake and pull it from a sunken stone.
I think my method was actually funnier with the blonde hanging out in the pond.
Kaiju's gonna have to find out. So we do have. Sorry, Chaz, did you have a question? I think you said too.
Oh yeah, and just real quick, I was very curious because the direction you took Gurzil being a descendant of what was it? I'm trying to remember if it was
Oh,
Baal. Yeah, yeah. So that was very interesting as well, and maybe that's just more of a
well,
comment.
actually, Gurzil is an actual Berber god. He's a
Okay.
Berber deity, and the only things we know about Gurzil, there are only 3 things that are actually known about Gurzil, which is odd given how important he was actually to that whole conflict and what the role that cult played.
Okay.
There are only 3 things that are known. One is that he was the horned god. That's his other name.
Uh-huh.
The other one is that he is the son of Baal Aman and either a human woman or a cow. Now, the one that says a human woman seems a bit more credible. The one that a cow was actually written by that account came from a Christian priest and definitely feels like talks about it being this just worthless idol that gets destroyed and all of this. It really did feel very religiously bent, as like we're just going to dismiss this thing as a as a cow-headed deity. And so I did, what I find out about the cult of Gurzil, usually he's depicted as a Minotaur, but nobody knows what Gurzil looked like. And so I did the horn god. He can be a he can be my dragon. He's this
Yeah.
he's the bad god in Libya. So you know what? He's going to become the dragon.
Yeah.
And
Well, that was very very cleverly done.
and in the next book, in the prologue that has been read, that how that plays a role and how Baal's whole descent, because Baal is also the god of the Carthaginians. So it made sense to have, going all the way back to Carthage and the whole this how he's been the role he's been playing in history and all of this. And it tied me in with the Vandals, which was a really hard thing to introduce because the Vandals, for all that they did, aren't well known. They're if anything, even in things like Barbarians Rising, they're a footnote in the Attila saga. Yet they're still the ones that dismantle Rome and really do give the final death knell, and they build their own empire for a period. They are certainly the power player and could easily have been the big empire in Africa and in the Middle East, and they just get clobbered. The interesting thing about the Vandals as well is that when you write the Vandals, the only real, the best description of what we think of as the Vandals is certainly the Corsairs of Umbar. And when you read like the Silmarillion and you read about the Corsairs of Umbar, you're like, these are not a minor bit part player. These are probably the most, for this little sliver of territory, they are the Dark Numenorians. They're probably his most badass, darkest servants. And yet we only kind of see them get clobbered by the army of the dead, and that's really all we see of the Corsairs of Umbar. But that's who they were. They were, this just group of pirates that lived in Carthage and were extremely powerful and extremely wealthy, and fall basically almost to a military blunder. They send their entire fleet to the wrong place, and everything fall and have no forces to resist basically 500 Imperials walking into Carthage. It's an interesting piece of history that's wholly ignored. And in the original bits. I'd originally seen Saba as almost a Vandal princess, and then I wanted her to be Libyan. So,
Well, that's great. Well, yeah, thank you for enlightening me on some of the history that you used for Gurzil. That's awesome.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think earlier on, Kaiju said that I.Anonymous is very well read, that she needs to read more. So do I.
well, I try to solve
Yeah.
that problem. I take the attitude actually that no, you just need to read Gurzil because I'm putting all of there's only of those books that I said, that like bit where I said there's only like a moderate stack of books. There's probably only like a couple hundred good lines in the whole of it that if you read those lines, you're good. So I include those lines and those important paragraphs in the novels so that you get the whole picture.
That's good to know. Yeah.
And sorry, Kaiju did get Gurzil while the live stream was
Oh,
going
wow.
on.
Thank
So well
you.
done.
I hope you enjoy it.
We do have a couple questions. T had to jump off, but we'll have the answer here for him when he gets back. Any specific Arthurian legends you're planning on bringing into book 3 that I don't know about yet?
Yes. Enid, who we actually saw in book 2, she is one of Morgana's ladies in waiting, is one of my, as I said, is one of my favorite stories. Her and Geralt do have their legend included in that. The other ones that are certainly the other Arthurian legend that is certainly going to play in the next upcoming novels is certainly the story of Tristan and Isolde. That's going to play out. There will also be
from earlier, sorry.
I'm
Tristan
trying
and
to,
Isolde is his favorite story.
yeah, Tristan and Isolde definitely play a major role. Not in the next book, but in the 4th or 5th book, probably the 4th book. We go into the Grail legend does play in eventually. It's very much in the keeping to the sort of as Bookish Chas's favorite section there in book 2. Kind of very similar to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the Grail saga plays a lot into my end game, into why George will eventually things will eventually kind of move forward on the George front. The other bits are going to be the coming of the Roman ambassadors. They are on their way over because we have to tie these plot lines together eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So lots to look forward to.
And then obviously a lot more goes down in this next book that goes down in the in Africa. There's a lot of the Africa arc moves forward a bit. Kind of slow. It wasn't really moving all that fast. We had some big incidents that happened, but we have obviously I left a lot unfinished there that needs to get moved on. And one thing that will be happening is we will also get we will also see a lot more of what's going on in the Byzantine Empire. We're going to see a lot more of characters like Antonia and her group, which we saw in flashbacks from Prudentius, and we saw some of that in book 2. And then, but the big one, and we also get some other characters coming in from the East, from India and from China, actually. And we will have an elephant, and I will leave it with that.
That's cool.
There
That's
is
awesome.
there is an elephant. There is a war elephant that is coming, and will be a major character.
That's
Very
very
nice.
cool.
Because we just have to see because who.
So we do have another question from Kaiju. Any new books in the works on the horizon?
Well, so the next book, which is called Malefica, is that, and then the book after that, the two books after that, which are mostly drafted at this point, are the Scourge and the Green King,
Nice.
which both
So,
go into different things.
so for pacing, because so far you've released 2 books in a year, if
Yep.
I'm correct in timing there. So are you looking to keep that kind of pace with the
Yeah, that's
upcoming
probably
releases?
that seems to be a doable pace.
Okay.
They're not long books, and in my particular case, as everybody goes, I feel bad because everybody tells me that, like, oh, you do so much, you must do so much research, it must take you forever, and it's actually like, no, actually the research makes it easier. I'm just sitting here hammering puzzle pieces together and then fleshing out around that and running the most difficult thing to come up with tends to be the dragon scenes, because I do have a rule. I have to make at least 3 Gurzil scenes each book. People want more Gurzil scenes, but there will be 3 Gurzil scenes, and 3 will be the counting, and there will never be.
We got to start counting them now. Keep track, Chas.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But yeah.
I'm always down for more Gurzil.
Oh, everybody's down for more Gurzil. But I will be giving you more evil characters. The vampire characters are coming into play in the next one, and so, and I think I will. That Bookish Chas will be interested to see how I could deal with the origin of the vampires.
You definitely got me curious.
Ooh.
Oh, very good.
There is one line, and I'm going to leave this as just a puzzle. There was one line in Dracula. It is probably Dracula's best line. It is actually borrowed from the origins and the histories of built off of the origin. It's actually built off of history itself. It's built off the origins and history of the Goths, and somewhat less impressive paragraph that's in there. And it always struck me, and it's a good paragraph, and it's been forgotten by too many vampire lorists, and it needs to come back.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you're bringing it back.
And when you see that, when you see Atticus the Bearkeeper, who he is you're not going to see it coming until it hits you right in the face, and then you're going to go, oh wow. Because even I go, oh wow, when I read it. I voted. So
cool.
We're gonna have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite classics too.
I
just have to throw this in here before we end the stream. Yep. Also off topic, but Chas reminds me of a young Sean Connery with his new hairstyle.
Actually, you know what? Sean Connery was my favorite King Arthur.
Yeah.
Sean Connery was my favorite actor to play King Arthur. I did not love The First Knight, but I liked Sean Connery as King Arthur.
He was a really good King Arthur. First Knight is a really, really good movie.
I liked it. I wanted to like it more. I think there were ways they could have made it maybe like it more. You know what? I'll tell you what I dislike about it. Lancelot is too likable. Lancelot should not be that likable. Lancelot should be like the GOAT, in my opinion. This complete asshole, but just a really, really good knight.
Yeah.
You heard it here. Lancelot's a goat.
He should be the Tom Brady of knights, not somebody that you consider a great person, but definitely the best knight in history.
All right. Well, we're over the hour mark.
think that's about it. I got to get going.
Yes. So thank you both for being here. I'll have links for I.Anonymous's books and Bookish Chas, your channel as well. You can find all their details down below. Thank you for a fantastic chat and kaiju
And
tea.
Kaiju, I hope you enjoy the audiobooks. I hope you keep up with the series. It's only just beginning.
Yes, and keep us in the loop if you want to share your experience with it too. Thank you everyone for joining us and have a
Thank you,
wonderful
guys.
evening.
See you, everybody. Thanks.